Hi, everybody. It's great to see you all. It's great to see some new people as well as old friends and long-standing Goldster members. Welcome to all of you. I'm really pleased to be here today for PPG. I know a lot of you are familiar with me from book club, but this is my second PPG, and it's great to be back here again. And I'm interviewing today a fantastic musician, author, keen cricketer, who was diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's at the age of 40, which, as he says, is just like a few months ago now. His name is Pete Langman, not Pete Langham. I do apologise for those of you who were given the wrong name. Pete Langman, who is here today to talk to us about his career and what it's like to play guitar when you've got Parkinson's. So Pete, welcome so much to the Goldster family. I was about to say Goldman, just as a kind of joke after the Langman thing, but that's going to confuse everyone. Welcome to the Goldster family. It's really great to see you here today. And you're living in two different places at the moment, aren't you? How did that feel in lockdown? Because you're kind of having to travel between countries.
Good morning all. Or is it morning, afternoon? I'm very confused.
Just afternoon.
In the Netherlands. It's been very odd, but actually in some ways rather good, because the beginning of the lockdown, we came back from Florida and then moved to Leiden, and then everything was locked down. So we spent the next few months in Leiden, then we went but spent the next few months in Brighton, then came back to Leiden, and we just spending months and months actually either in the town or not even leaving the house, which is quite perturbing because it's quite small over here. And we're currently waiting for the new house in Oxfordshire, which I'm buying, to actually go through. And we all know what a pain buying a house is at the moment.
Oh, God, yeah.
It's been horrendous. Oh my Lord. My entire life is in a lock-up garage in Banbury. I don't even know my name anymore.
Well, it's right, no, just as well, because no one knew your name either, as it turned out. So
any name will do.
So Pete, I first knew you as an author of your book Slender Threads, which I'd like to talk about a bit later. But as I understand that's actually not who you decided to be when you were younger as your career. I'm right, you started as a musician, not an author. Is that correct?
Yes, I did. I from the age of about 15, when I picked up the guitar, I had a small sojourn at military academy, which I was originally going to go into the army, and but by that time I started playing the guitar, decided I was going to be a professional, and so ended up leaving the military academy under a cloud. I think I'm the only person ever to have been expelled. And then
I'm sure you're not.
I think that place I'm the only person who's been expelled, as far as I know.
Wow.
Well, it was the school was fantastic in a bizarre sort of way, because it was in Welbeck Abbey, Welbeck College. So it's in the Duke of Portland's place, which is the place with all the tunnels in, which of course, if you're 16 and you're military minded, was just great fun. Just the rest of it was horrible. Then I went to America to study music in Los Angeles.
Wow.
Studied guitar, and so I lived in Hollywood for a year and a half studying electric guitar, and came back to London and started trying to forge my career in rock and roll music, and did okay in a lot of senses. I ended up writing for a magazine. I had a teach kind of rock guitar column in a magazine for about 5 years. I was head of rock guitar at the Musicians Institute in London. I ended up being a very good guitar player, but by the end of the 90s, various things had happened, and I ended up getting really quite bad anxiety and performance anxiety, which is problematic if you're a musician. And by that time, I'd started reading a lot, especially Dickens. I read an awful lot of Dickens and thought, actually, I just want to read books. So I ended up going to university, and everything just went a bit strange after that.
And you've got a PhD, haven't you?
I do have a PhD. I did also write a novel before I left music as well.
Ah, and was it ever published?
Luckily not, no. Almost. I got some very good responses from people, some of whom are very famous in the business now, which was quite interesting, because I was apparently I was very good at approaching people then, but I'm not anymore. But yes,
I think you should look at it again now and see what it's like.
I don't think I dare.
All that kind of adolescent anxiety in your novel.
Well, kind of. I mean, I wasn't 30 at the time, but it was just.
Yeah. So you were working as a musician, and then you started. Then you started writing, or you started writing after your diagnosis?
Well, I started writing quite a long time before my diagnosis. So my writing really started probably, I suppose, with the guitar magazine. So about 1995, I was writing technical writing, so about teaching guitar. Then I started writing fiction in 98, I suppose, something like that. Wrote the first novel, then went to university. I'd obviously not been to study English, went to Queen Mary in London, and then ended up doing this PhD thing, which got totally out of, I mean, I was basically blindsided by Lisa Jardine, and who told me I had to do a PhD. So
when Lisa Jardine tells you to do a PhD, you just do it, I'd imagine.
Well, exactly. If anyone's ever met her, that's exactly what happens. You know, there's no point in saying no to her. So I did that, and it was just after, it was the year after I got my PhD that I was diagnosed, 2008.
And what was your PhD on?
Francis Bacon, the philosopher, not the artist.
Not the artist, yeah.
Not the artist, no.
So you started working as an academic, and this was when you'd had your diagnosis, is that right?
I was diagnosed, yes, I was diagnosed. Actually, I was lecturing at Goldsmiths at the time, and I remember I went from being diagnosed directly to Goldsmiths to lecture on the Fairy Queen, as we do. So I mean, I do remember standing there lecturing, talking about the Fairy Queen, and thinking, you know, my head was slightly exploding because I'd just been told I had Parkinson's, which is a bit strange.
Yeah, you probably still hadn't been able to process it, I'd imagine. You're probably just on
No, it takes
autopilot.
a long time to process that sort of thing.
Yeah. So tell us about when you were diagnosed. I mean, did you know there was something wrong, or was it just completely out of the blue?
Well, yeah, what had happened is that I'd stopped playing guitar completely in the year 2000. When I was at university, and I was also working as a sound engineer in the theatre. And I decided in about 2006, 2007 that I fancied playing the guitar again. So I picked it up, and something was wrong. Something just wasn't right. And I was a very good technical guitarist. And it wasn't that I was rusty. There were things going on that shouldn't be going on. So I started investigating. I was also doing a lot of karate at the time, and people started hitting me who shouldn't be allowed to hit me, if that makes sense. People just were doing things that they really shouldn't have been able to do to me. So I started investigating, couldn't find anything. And then I went to my mother's 80th birthday. No, I lie, 70th. I'm making her much older than she is. Her 70th birthday party. My father had already died. My uncle was there, who was a quite well-respected and well-known academic medic, professor of medicine. I was explaining to people why I didn't play the guitar anymore, which basically at that point consisted of me sticking my right hand up, if I can do this, and saying, look, this is my right hand, but this is the one that actually does the work.
Yeah.
And of course, that basically stopped people from hassling me about playing the guitar. He called me over and says, you need to see a neurologist. And then phoned up my mother the next day and said, I told Pete to see a neurologist yesterday. Can you tell him I wasn't joking? And so I went to my GP and I said, this is going to sound awful, but my uncle tells me I have to see a neurologist. This is who he is. And he said, oh, okay, fair enough. So I immediately went to see the neurologist, who basically diagnosed me pretty much there and then, but also said that he couldn't diagnose me because they needed to check that it wasn't a brain tumor, that it wasn't Wilson's, that it wasn't all these other things that present in the same way, even though he said it's none of these, it's this. So I had this kind of semi-diagnosis hanging over me for about 2 months until I had my MRI scan, when I was finally diagnosed. So,
wow. And how did it start immediately changing your life, or were you just thinking, I'm going to carry on as normal, or what were the repercussions instantly of having had that diagnosis?
Huge, because the most instant one was that at the time I was married. When I was diagnosed, we were going through IVF at the time, and it was pretty much the same week that it failed, which is, you know, an interesting week.
God.
And
yeah.
then my wife wanted to do it again, and I'm just thinking, I've just got this incurable degenerative brain disease. I can't cope. I cannot cope with this. I cannot cope with this. And within a year, we split up because it's just, the pressure was too much. She wanted to do one thing. I couldn't see myself having children at all, being in a position degenerating to a point where I couldn't actually be a father. So that kind of stymied that completely. So that was a huge life change. And then, of course, I'm thrown into the beginning of an academic career, which is very difficult anyway. And this caused a lot of trouble. And there's trouble with medication. It takes ages to get the medication right. There are problems with behavioral problems with some of the medication. The fact that you've been diagnosed with something like this has a tendency to affect your mood and affect whether you feel depressed or not. So it gets much more difficult swimming is quite hard. It's put it that way. And so it took me a fair while to get back onto an even keel, by which time my academic career had basically fallen apart.
So
And
what
I
did you
couldn't get
decide to, sorry.
and I couldn't get a job. So I just kind of started work as a writer stroke editor, and that's what I was doing at the time. So,
And who were you working for then?
well, I basically I've worked freelance all my life, fundamentally since '88, I suppose, with the occasional job in between. I mean, I've had 3 jobs: one as a painter and decorator when I was 17, one as a lecturer at Goldsmiths, and another one as a kind of postdoctoral researcher sort of thing, making videos on at Sussex University for the Newton Project, which was fantastic fun. But those are the only actual.
What was the project?
It's called the Newton. Well, it's a thing called Enlightening Science, which is an offshoot of the Newton Project, and it was designed to get funding so that we could do more transcription of Newton papers. But the flashy bit was making these video reconstructions of the experimental lecturers from the 18th and 19th century who used to go around demonstrating Newtonian physics. And they made machines, and they took them into the coffee shops, and they took them into the working men's clubs and all these places.
Fantastic.
Demonstrated, sold the books, sold the machines. So I basically was given the job of making these machines or getting them made and shooting videos of them for education purposes. Absolute riot, total chaos, but fantastic fun. We had such fun doing it. But I had my budget was about 12p and a half a W.H. Smith sandwich. It was really quite interesting. I spent the first 6 months raising money.
And so when after that, when you said your academic career fell apart, I mean, with Goldsmiths not supportive, or was it just that you felt you couldn't carry on?
Well, I was on the first year that I worked for Goldsmiths, I was working covering maternity leave as I was the second time, and so but basically there wasn't a job there for me, so I was just working the sessional cover, even though I was a full lecturer. And unfortunately what then happened is that the next few jobs I applied for had already been given to somebody else. And then after 2 or 3 years of that, you just realize it's impossible. And also I hadn't written a monograph, because the time when I'd written the monograph, I'd been too busy panicking about having Parkinson's. And so that was the year that I should have turned my PhD into a monograph, which I never did. So that kind of all reached a head, so to speak.
Yeah. Wow. So really, really tough time. Your marriage had broken up, and you decided that the career that you thought you were going to be in wasn't going to happen. What did you do? I mean, how did you get out of that slump?
Good question, actually. Part of it, I think, was what I started to do. I started to get more into the Parkinson's advocacy, because one of the things that I noticed very, very early on is that there was nothing about Parkinson's when you're younger, and there was almost nothing that you could find anywhere. There are a few people who are blogging about it, most of whom are friends of mine now, a couple of whom are not with us anymore, but there were very few people who had it or officially had it. The figures there was no research on it. There were no figures really. And so I started getting involved in that, started blogging, and I ended up writing a book about it. And then I started raising money for Parkinson's UK, partially through cricket, and then partially through another book that I wrote. And so I ended up doing stuff all based around that. So I was doing a lot of advocacy and writing articles here or there and everywhere, and earning money here and there, and just kind of keeping my head above water like that.
You mentioned cricket, so tell us about your love of cricket. When did that begin, and how has it manifested itself in recent years?
Well, I've always loved the game to watch, and in mid 2000s, 2005, I suppose, 2006. One of my best friends, I was best man at his wedding, and he decided he wanted to have a game of cricket, but as a stag do. So we organised that. I hadn't played since I was at school. I was useless at school, and I top scored, which is fun, and I really quite enjoyed scoring a lot of runs. It turns out that in the following 13 years, I've only scored more runs than that once, which is a little bit frustrating, but at least I have. And then I just thought, why don't I get a team? And so I ended up playing for a team in Brighton, and then I ended up playing for more people. And then I had this idea. Did I do that first? I'm just trying to think. Timings are really kind of my brain has gone with timings wise. One thing I did do, I ripped my left shoulder doing jiu-jitsu quite badly.
Ow.
I had to have an operation to fix it. Took 3.5 hours for the surgeons to stitch me back together again.
Oh.
But that meant that I couldn't use my left arm for 6 months. And so I thought, well, okay, I can't play cricket. This is ridiculous. And then I thought, well, actually, I can still bat because I can bat one-handed, but that means I have to bat left-handed. So what I did is I learned how to bat left-handed, and I thought it was such a stupid thing to do that I sponsored my runs for that year for Parkinson's UK, and got a column with All Out Cricket, a cricket magazine at the time. So every month I was writing for them about what it was like to bat left-handed, and this turned into what it was like to bat left-handed and how it was to play cricket with Parkinson's, and that turned into me playing at lots of interesting places. I started playing for the Sussex over 60s, which is quite a giggle. And then I noted that in Sussex, especially, there's some beautiful, beautiful cricket grounds. And so I started thinking it'd be really nice to do a book about cricket grounds. And I went out to dinner with a friend, and this turned into, let's write a book about going to country houses and playing cricket. And so that's what happened. I ended up writing this book I spent the summer, I basically phoned up all these different people and said, I'm doing this book about country house cricket. Can I come and play for you, please? And they all said, sure. Having no idea who I was, what the hell I was doing, whether I was any good or not. A couple of times I was really, really quite embarrassingly the worst player on the pitch. Most of the time I was quite close, but half the time I was there or thereabouts. But it was fantastic fun. And I played places like Blenheim Palace, Goodwood. I'm trying to think all the places I played now, Penshurst, Petworth Park. I didn't play Petworth, I wanted to, I play it now. So I played in all these wonderful country houses and met some fantastic people, a lot of whom I'm still friends with, and still play with a Sunday team who basically play country houses only because of me, because I bumped into them. I bumped into them during this whole season, and they asked me to play for them, and I've been playing for them ever since.
I've just put the link for your website for the book on there. So did people start who owned these country houses, did they start wanting you to come along? Did it become a kind of a big thing amongst the country house community, if there is such a thing?
I had a couple of talks to the people who actually owned them. So like at okay, my brain has gone completely. Parham Park, I spoke to the owner, but mostly the cricket was always kind of slightly to the left of the actual house. It's like at Blenheim Palace, the lord there, he didn't like to see anything being done to the wicket about cricket unless it was being played. So the pavilion is tucked around the corner, so you can't see it. So it's all a bit weird. So they didn't generally have a lot. It's not like in the old days of country house cricket where the lord would go out and play with his gardeners and whatever.
Yeah,
it's changed. So they don't tend to do that. A couple of times. I think that happened at Knoll. I played with not the so I can't remember his name now, but his brother. So can't remember the guy's name. My memory is age, and Parkinson's really does bad things to your memory.
And the last couple of years of lockdown, I think, has messed up with everybody's memory. So I think it's really fighting a losing battle at the moment. Yeah.
But I ended up becoming good friends with a lot of these people as well. But the teams are slightly divorced from the actual houses. But
right.
Still fun.
So the people that you've met through this, I mean, you've just, through doing this, you've had a lot of other kind of cricketers start coming along. You've got professional cricketers who are interested in this. How did the project evolve? And I know you wrote the book, but as a kind of cricket playing thing.
The book came out beautifully. I mean, even though I did it all myself, and it still came out beautifully, which was great. It was actually long listed for the Cricket Society Book of the Year, MCC Cricket Society Book of the Year that year. Sadly, wasn't shortlisted, which is irritating, because I then would have gone to the Ponzi dinner at Lord's. But yes, everyone really enjoyed it. I only printed 1,000, sold all but about 10. I think I've got 10 or 12 at home that I've kept, and almost all of them at the back of the van, pretty much. So I sold quite a few, and I was on Test Match Special at one point, because of course I was being introduced to people constantly, and I'd gone to Wormsley I think to play with the authors. They had a words and wickets thing, and I'd gone there for then, and I bumped into the guy who ran the place at the time, was an ex-cricketer, who was introducing me to other people. So he introduced me to some of the TMS people, and then I ended up, because of that being said, well, actually, it's raining this time. So I just see, that was when I was watching the Indian women play the English women test. And it started raining, so they grabbed me and said, come in here and be interviewed. So they interviewed me on TMS. That was quite fun.
Fantastic.
So it was carnage really, but just marvelous fun.
Yeah. So you've become a real name in the cricketing world then.
I probably was for a while. It's gone down a little bit since, because of course nothing's really happened the last 2 years, but certainly there was a time when a lot of people knew who I was.
And does it worry you now, as you say, we've not been able to do the kind of team sports for a couple of years? Does it concern you that you're not going to be able to get back to how you were before?
I mean, it's going to be difficult. Certainly last year I didn't play at all because my shoulder also, I've been having a lot of problems with my right shoulder now, which is again, frozen shoulders are a common Parkinson's problem. But I'm waiting to get back into my old team, and because I'm moving from Sussex to Oxfordshire again, I've got to find a new team as well. So if I'm going to play on Saturdays, but I think I'll manage it because I still have enough people that I know. Good. We'll see.
Yeah, I think because a lot of people have that kind of anxiety at the moment, having not done either classes or team sports, that when it all starts up again, will we all have lost that kind of ability to do that? I mean, I just feel, next time I go to an actual yoga class, rather than doing it online, I'm just going to be laughed at, because I feel like, everything's changed in the last couple of years. And there is an anxiety about that.
I think there is. And I think one of the problems I have is that I've been very fit for quite a long time, because I've done an awful lot of work. I was very fit when I was diagnosed, and I carried on doing an awful lot of exercise, which is very good for the best therapy for Parkinson's, really. And so I'd be going to the gym 3 times a week, training martial arts a couple of times a week, and also playing cricket. So I was extremely fit. Last 2 years, I've done almost nothing. So my body is just, what's going to happen when I get back on the cricket pitch is going to be interesting to see. But I'm not quite in the shape I was, and it's affecting my symptoms as well, unfortunately. Right.
Because you wrote an article, what Parkinson's has taught me about COVID-19. Would you talk to us about that?
Yes, I mean, this was last year I wrote this. Was it last year? Was it the year before? I can't remember. It might have been
2020, I can see on it. May 2020.
I'm also trying to remember what the article was about, because it's basically it was about uncertainty. That what everyone was talking about at that point was, what the hell's going to happen next? How do we know? How can we cope with this uncertainty? And it's the thing to me about Parkinson's is that, yes, it's debilitating, but actually when you're diagnosed, you're not really ill. There's nothing really wrong with you. And whenever you tell people, they look at you with well, you're not ill, you don't look ill, you look perfectly fine. And certainly when I'm playing cricket, my walk is dodgy, but when I run, I run pretty quickly still. And it surprises people quite often that I'll shuffle to the crease, but actually run between the wickets. But the really debilitating part of Parkinson's is the potentiality, what's going to happen to you. And that's what's really crippling, is that that you don't know what's going to happen, but you know that stuff is going to happen. You don't know which part of it is going to happen. You don't know which part of it's going to hit you when. I mean, it was about 4 or 5 years before I developed a tremor, because it's not always the first sign,
right?
Especially if you're younger. And young onset Parkinson's does present differently to Parkinson's that's normal Parkinson's, which is I mean, the median age I think is about 64 to develop Parkinson's. Right. So now I'm getting much closer to what people would expect, but of course I've had it 14 years. So, and it does progress differently, it seems. It progresses slower and in different ways, and different things happen to you, because of course it's interacting differently with the way that your body is. Because if you're 70 and you get Parkinson's, your body is already in a slightly different state to the way that would be if you're 50 or 40. But it's the potentiality that's the real problem. It's the potential of what's going to happen. It's the uncertainty, the not knowing. And that, of course, is suddenly what everyone was freaking out about with COVID. When's this going to stop? When's this going to happen? What's going to happen next? How the hell do we know? And I'm just like, well, welcome to my world, people. This is exactly what we're all. Of course, we're all like that to a degree anyway, because life is like that. But we ignore it because it's not actually any use, that kind of thought, is it? It's just that when you have something like Parkinson's, it's always there poking you and reminding you that there are other things to come.
Yeah. So tell us about Slender Threads, because this is how I first came to know you, through your book Slender Threads. Do you want to explain to everybody what it is and how you came to write it?
Well, Slender Threads was one of the things that I noted, like as I said earlier, after my diagnosis is that there was almost nothing about Parkinson's on the media. There were no books about it, other than there was lots of stuff on therapies and all this kind of nonsense. But there was absolutely nothing that I could find about how it made you feel emotionally and spiritually and intellectually, I suppose. And especially young onset Parkinson's, there was just nothing on there. So I was completely every day was a learning experience. It was teaching me how I could deal with myself, how I could deal with the condition, how I could deal with the new things that were happening or weren't happening, things that weren't working suddenly, things that suddenly I had to change my behavior with, and the way that I worked in certain areas. I mean, now my typing is hilarious, for example, because I have a tremor, and so I type with 2 fingers and a thumb, and I probably make a mistake, 2 or 3 mistakes every 6 letters. So it's like this, constantly backwards and forwards. And also if my finger's anywhere near my mouse pad, which of course it is most of the time, if my tremor goes, my screen is changing size. But if I have it on click, I can't hold the click down.
Right.
So I have this kind of problem where it's just always like, how the hell do I keep these things working? And so I realized that there was nothing there for me when I was diagnosed to actually tell me what was going on, what was going to happen, or what might happen, or how you might feel. So I thought what I'd do is write a book just about how I felt for the first few years, not because it's universal in any way, shape, or form, but just because I wanted to say, this is how I felt, and you've got permission to feel however the hell you want. That's fine, but this is the kind of thing that you might be coming across. And people really appreciated it. I think I still get letters or emails. Really, I don't get letters. I still get emails from people saying, I've just found your book and it's the most wonderful thing that I've read. And it's just taught me so much about Parkinson's. I think I've heard a couple of people say it's really depressing, because Parkinson's is quite depressing. So you want to be honest. Mm-hmm. But the real thing that people have liked has been that I was very honest about what was happening, good and bad, and about the process and about how I was feeling about it. And I think people feel guilty about feeling bad when they get ill these days. Something happens to you, and if you're not super positive and I'm up and at 'em and I'm going to beat this and I'm going to defeat everything, you're actually evil.
I think that's so true. Yeah, you are expected to be upbeat all the time.
Yeah. And it's just ridiculous. It's like this. I mean, it's like the fighting cancer thing. I will defeat cancer. Well, I mean, it doesn't work like that. I mean, unfortunately, my father died of cancer. I know how this stuff works, and most of us know how this stuff works. We either know somebody or have had it ourselves. And it doesn't, this fighting stuff is really no use, because you're always going to lose in the end. And of course, what happens if you think you're fighting, people talk about fighting Parkinson's as well, and they say, I know you'll fight this. And it's like, how can you fight something that doesn't obey your rules of engagement, doesn't care whether it wins or loses, and will always win in the end? I mean, it's just daft, because all you're going to get is depressed. The way I look at it is like, if Parkinson's is going to screw stuff up over there, well, I'm not going to go there. Sod that. I'm going to do something else. Unless I really, really wanted to go over there, in which case I'll find a way around it. But there's only so much energy that you have.
Yeah. Well, I've put in the chat for anybody, I've put the link to Slender Threads on Amazon. You can buy the Kindle edition. So if you think that there's anybody who would benefit from that, or if you'd like to read it yourself, please do share that link. As always, when the link is in the chat, it's hard to copy and paste. So you have to click on the link and let it open up a different open up again on your screen. And if anybody has any comments or questions, please do feel free to put it in the chat, as always. So you said, if something isn't happening here, you're going to move over here and start doing something new. I want to talk about you going back to something. So you wrote an album in 1995. Tell us now about the journey of that.
Yes. So in 1995, a student of mine asked me if he could do workshop. He was at school. He asked me if he could do work shadowing with me, and I was like, sure, no problem. And then after he'd gone, I thought, oh my God, what have I done? Because all I did, I taught all day, I practiced all day, I did some recordings, occasionally played some gigs at that point, and wrote articles. And I thought, this is going to be really dull. And when he goes back to school, they're going to say, what did you do with your guitar teacher then? And they're going to take the piss out of him. So I thought, what I'm going to do, when they ask him this question, he's just going to hold this thing up and say, we recorded an album. So in a week, we recorded an album.
Wow.
In my studio, flat out from beginning to end. So it was really, it was hard work. It was very hard work. all the drums and all this stuff were programmed, and I played all the guitars and basses. 10 tracks, bish bosh bash, some very, very, very good guitar playing on it, even though it's 30 or 25, 26 years ago. A few years ago, an old student of mine asked me whether I had it on CD because his tape copy had died because he played it so much. And I said, sure. So I sent him one. He said, actually, you know what? I'd really love to be able to do this tune. He's a demonstrator for a big global guitar firm, and he goes around the country demonstrating the guitars and all this. He said, I'd love to do this in one of my clinics. And I said, well, sure, of course you can, but I've got no idea how I played it because this is a long time ago and I haven't touched the guitar for years. And his mate said, well, surely you've got the original master tapes. And I thought, well, I suppose. And I found them in the shed. And the machine that I built it on had gone, and there was no other machine like that in the country. So I found one in America. So I sent it to New Jersey, and they digitized it, sent it back, and we started getting old friends of mine and old colleagues of mine, old sparring partners and people I used to play with, to put new drum tracks, new bass tracks, and add extra guitar solos and extra guitar parts. And we just decided we're going to redo the album. So we're slowly redoing it. We've finished 3 tracks now. We've got 4 or 5 ready to be mixed, and then 2 or 3 are just have a few more tracks to be put down. And hopefully when that's done, we'll be releasing that in aid of Spotlight Young Onset Parkinson's, which is the charity devoted to helping people with young onset Parkinson's, just helping them cope with the changes in their life. But it's crazy. I'm playing with people who are very, very fine musicians, and were fine musicians then, but have carried on. And so it's me. It's I don't know if you remember, maybe 20 years ago, I think Natalie Cole did a duet with her father, Nat King Cole.
Yes, yeah, I do. That was extraordinary, wasn't it?
And he was dead.
Yes.
But this is basically what's happening here. It's just that the guitar player I was gone. I mean, I cannot play this stuff anymore. I mean, the stuff I was playing was phenomenally complicated. And I mean, as a guitar player, I was playing the Flight of the Bumblebee when I was 21 on the guitar.
Wow.
At full speed and perfectly articulated. I was very, very good. I can barely play an open C major chord now. So that guitar player, dead and gone. Bye-bye. But he's playing with all these people now who are fantastic players now. I mean, some of these players are absolutely fantastic players who are playing with me. And I'm keeping up, or my old me is keeping up with them, which is quite astonishing to hear.
That's fantastic.
And it's also, there's so many things about the way that we record, the way that we used to record, because all of the parts that I played, we hit the tape, Greg hit the tape, played record, I played it, and then we stopped and went, was that okay? Yeah, that was okay, right, next tune. Whereas now you put things together slowly, but digitally, bit by bit. It's a little bit like writing in manuscript and then writing on a word processor.
Yes.
You know, you can go back and change everything. On a manuscript, it's just like, okay, that's it, I'm done.
It must be an amazing feeling to have been able to bring back something from the 1990s and just produce it now, and it's still sounding really good.
It's potty. I mean, it's really ridiculous. And the 2 tunes that are out there that are finished are very, very, very rock. They're very rock. There's one that I've also just finished. We haven't got a recording of it online yet, which is much more kind of jaunty, kind of cod reggae sort of thing, much more melodic in that respect. But it sounds fantastic because the guys who've played it, and also it's been remixed with modern technology, with all the kind of stuff that can be done with that. So it is quite astonishing how it sounds now. I'm very proud of it, actually.
Yeah, you should be.
I just wish I could play it.
Yeah, it must be so frustrating. But it's going to be out there, and at least everyone can hear you're playing from the past.
Well, yes, with other people who are much better than me now, but that's more.
And so we've got a comment from Jean. She says, my mother was diagnosed with Parkinson's in the 1990s. We realized she must have had it for quite a long time. There was no help or information at that time. So that's a kind of decade and a half before you were diagnosed. Have you heard similar things from other people about how?
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly this. It's actually not that dissimilar now, to be honest with you. There isn't enough help. There isn't enough support. So many people. I still hear people being told that they've got Parkinson's and that's it, and they're not given any. They're not pointed to any organisations. There are some organisations who do stuff. Parkinson's UK. I don't agree with them on a lot of things, but they still are there and they still support. Yeah. And there are a lot of people. The community is very good. So when people contact me and say, a friend of mine's been diagnosed, what do? I say, go to this website here and talk to people, because there are people who will just talk to you about it. It's fine, you know. We're all happy to do that. We're very proactive as a community. There really is a Parkinson's community. I think lots of communities don't really exist, but the Parkinson's community really does, because we know, a lot of us know each other and and visit each other and, you know, talk to each other. We talk about diagnosis. We talk about the different drugs we have. Every so often, if you're in a town and you run out of one particular drug you want, you can get the drugs you need just by going onto Facebook and saying, "Has anybody got this?" And everyone will say, "Yeah, I can give you a strip of that."
Wow, that's really good.
It's necessary, because, of course,
Yeah,
I don't get the pills that I have, that I take. If I don't take the levodopa that I have, I can't walk pretty much. You know, before I started taking levodopa, I was walking with a stick.
Right. Wow.
And now, when I go off, I'm off. I'm shuffling. I look like an 80-year-old. No offense to any 80-year-olds, but I really do.
And has there been a problem with getting hold of the drugs in the last kind of year or so? Is there a problem? Because I know there've been certain drugs that people can't get in the UK because of Brexit.
Some friends of mine have struggled in certain places. I've not. I've been quite lucky. I think mostly because I've got them in the Netherlands. So for some reason, the supply is better here. But I know some friends of mine in the UK have really struggled at times, and to the point where sometimes they just haven't had them.
I've heard this from other people. It's deeply, deeply worrying. And I think it's something that's not being talked about enough in the media. It's just being glossed over.
But there's also the problem with generic drugs, because I found this when I was on dopamine agonists, which are in themselves very dangerous things, but that's another story altogether. That if I got ones from I can't remember, I think it was the Greek ones that really didn't work very well. The Spanish ones are okay. The Greek ones, everything just went horribly wrong. And I could look at the pill pack and I'd be like, oh, this is what my next week's going to be like.
Oh,
because
God.
I see which type of generic ones I have. And I have that same problem here sometimes. The ones I've got are not too bad. The ones I had the last batch were like horse pills. They were massive. And of course, a lot of people with Parkinson's have problems swallowing. These things are like this big. And you're just like, what are you doing? That was interesting. I got a couple of times on those. That was fun.
And you kind of grind them up in a coffee grinder and swallow them that way or something?
Well, you can't, because they're slow release.
Oh, right.
So you can't even do that. It's
that's somebody who just hasn't thought in the creation of those drugs, isn't it?
No, there's an awful lot of not thinking an awful lot of not thinking goes on in the world, let's face it, but certainly around Parkinson's, people who deal with it don't think a lot. When I was diagnosed, when I was sent the second time for the MRI scan, the waiting room was in the summer room of the neurological ward. So I'm going there waiting to talk to a neurologist about whether I really do have Parkinson's. And I'm surrounded by people in bed who've had their brains operated on, who really aren't functioning very well as human beings, because they're just kind of like splat. I'm just thinking, this isn't really making me feel very good.
No.
I started talking to this couple, and within a few minutes I realized that the wife was actually she was on a loop of about 3 minutes. Every 3 minutes she'd start the same conversation again, literally. And her husband would just go through the motions. He'd just do the same answers, because this was what her brain was doing. And it's just like,
wow, what an example of love as well.
Yeah, I mean, the poor guy. I felt so. I mean, at one point he actually went off to go to the toilet, and I just carried on, because I knew the conversation after half an hour. I'd heard it so many times. I could just talk about it, and he just kind of went off and came back again.
So Ruth has asked. Sorry.
No, carry on.
Ruth has asked, is Slender Threads available as a book or only on Kindle?
It is available as a book. It's print to order, so you can order it as a book. They will give it to you in paper. Yeah, I believe still, yeah.
Okay, great. Sandra says, I hope you found someone else in your life. And I think
she's upstairs.
I think you're actually working on a project with her at the moment, aren't you?
I am, yes. My partner is an academic. She's a fantastic academic, a historian. She's just published a book on the biography of Elizabeth Stuart, Queen of Bohemia, called Elizabeth Stuart, Queen of Hearts, which is marvelous. Go and buy it now. And the last book she did before that was a book called Invisible Agents, about female spies in the 17th century.
Oh, fascinating. Maybe we have to get her onto the book club. That would be amazing.
Which is also what I based my novel on, that was out a couple of years ago, Killing Beauties. Based on two of the spies that she discovered, that no one had talked about before. And so I wove them into a little we're working on it. We haven't quite signed the contract yet, but it's coming through. we're working on a joint project about spies at the moment. We're just starting up, so we're very excited about that. That'll be out in 2 years, I think, because it's kind of academic-y, so it'll take quite a while to do. But
we've got a comment about you made a comment about Greek medicine, and it says, well, history can be deceiving. I thought the Greeks are the ones to be thanked for medicine. Then the Arabic peoples also made a huge contribution, and they were present in Spain for a long time. But I'm just blathering. Feel free to blather. We quite like that in the chat. If anybody else wants to blather, they're very, very welcome to. Now, Pete, I believe that you actually had a career as a bit of a kind of heartthrob band, in a heartthrob band, didn't you? But after their heyday, can I reveal that you were a member of the Bay City Rollers for a while?
I was, yes, this is true.
Tell us about this. I can see a couple of people laughing at this, yeah. Tell us about your career with the Bay City Rollers.
Well, this is one of these bizarre things that happens. I got a phone call on a Monday morning, and it was a friend of mine who just played bass on one of the tracks on the album, who I used to play a lot with, and we used to work in the same music school. And he said, guitarist left the band, do you want the gig? So I just said, sure, because of course that's what you do when you're a professional musician. And then I said, what's the gig? And he said, the Rollers. I'm like, oh God, do I have to? But it was funny. And he said, okay, so I'll bring you a tape tomorrow. By the way, we're flying out to Germany on Friday. We've got 2 gigs this weekend. So I said, okay, cool. So he came up on Tuesday with the tape. On Wednesday, I learned the songs. On Thursday, we had a rehearsal. There was a Japanese film crew, TV crew, making a documentary about Les, because it's Les McEwen's version. And so we played one song about 10 times, and that was it. So I played one song a lot. And then on Friday morning, we flew out to Germany.
Wow.
And we're in a hall of 6,000 or 7,000 people, something like that. I can't remember. It was quite big anyway. And we're playing with the first band on a Mud, Les Gray's Mud. Les Gray, he's dead now, bless his soul, lovely chap. Then us, then Sweet, and then Uriah Heep. So it's a really kind of quite a rocky show. And I remember standing on the side of the stage, about to go on, thinking, I don't know any of these songs. And I've only played one of them before with the band, but that's okay, I'm a professional, it'll be fine. And of course, it was absolutely fine. But and then the next week, we were in a bingo hall in Doncaster, playing to a very strange crowd who really just wanted to play bingo. It was quite odd, and in some ways I think this is 96, 97. And it pretty much broke what was left of my spirit for music, and that's when I started having real problems with performance anxiety. And I had this problem at college as well, which I also think, and it's becoming more plain, that this was an early Parkinson's symptom.
Right.
Because it's one of the things, I mean, it's difficult obviously to judge, because these things are very difficult to judge, but a lot of Parkinson's people suffer from very bad anxiety, and also a lot of digestive problems 5 to 10 years before they're diagnosed. And I was having a lot of issues with that ilk in the late 90s. So it wouldn't surprise me that was actually the first stirrings of that. Because of course, when you're diagnosed with Parkinson's, you've had it for ages. It's just taken that long for it to do something to you that you notice. And I probably noticed earlier than most people would have done because of the guitar, because I was used to being able to do certain things with my fingers, and fine motor control is one of the things that goes. And of course, my fine motor control, my left hand, wasn't gone, but it was much reduced, and it was reduced enough that I was just like, oh, this is weird, because I was so knowledgeable about how my fingers should work. When they didn't work like that, I noticed. So if it hadn't been guitar, I probably would have been 3 or 4 years before I'd have been diagnosed.
Wow. But you were obviously concerned about it enough at your mother's birthday that you were talking about it, and that your uncle noticed it. So do you think you had in the back of your mind had that idea, or the very fact that you were showing people the difference between your hand movements?
Well, no, see, I wasn't really concerned. I mean, I was concerned because I was just like, this is really annoying. But I just assumed that I was getting old and I was getting arthritis, which happens to a lot of guitar players, because I spent 10 years playing the guitar for 10 hours a day, which is quite bad for your limbs. But the reason that I was showing people is people kept saying to me, oh, you should just go back to playing the guitar again. And I'm just trying to say, look, I've been out of the business for 8 years. It doesn't work like that. I can't just jump back in again. It's like I haven't played the guitar for 8 years. And so it's just much easier to say, look, my fingers don't work, because then it would stop people from talking about it.
And did you know anyone else who'd had Parkinson's before? Did you know anything about the disease before you were diagnosed?
I knew that it existed, but I knew nothing, absolutely nothing. I mean, it would have been interesting if my father survived. He died in 2003, I think, of leukemia. But he was a GP, and he was a fantastic diagnostician. And it would be very interesting to see whether he would have noticed and he would have picked up on it.
Yeah.
But no, I knew nothing about it at all. It wasn't one of the diseases that came up in Disease of the Day at home when we used to sit down at the table. My father would say, "So, meningitis, what exactly are the main symptoms and how do you deal with it?" You know, it's like, oh,
wow. So basically, you could have been a GP. You were getting amassing all this knowledge.
Well, absolutely. I mean, this happened all the time. I mean, he would just say, "Right, now we need to tell you about this." It's like, okay, great. So I actually have all this weird arcane knowledge. But Parkinson's never came up, so I knew nothing about it whatsoever. It was entirely, I knew that it was something that, like as everyone does, something that old people get, and Muhammad Ali had it, and you know, Michael Lee Fox. That was Michael J. Fox. Michael Lee Fox. Yeah. Michael J. Fox. That's all I knew, as everybody does. You know? I learned very quickly, but that was all I knew about it. And I thought it was just
you've been doing. Sorry.
I thought it was just a tremor like anybody else, but of course there are something like 40 distinct symptoms in the symptom packet that you get for Parkinson's. It's great. It's this whole box of stuff. It's like, I'll have this today. Yay.
And so you've been doing in kind of trying to bring that awareness. Have you noticed that that's really made a difference? That do you get asked to kind of talk on news programs or anything about it? Have you been kind of?
I have done. I mean, I've slowed down with doing all that stuff over the last few years. I mean, certainly for the first 2 or 3 years after I published the book, both books, I was on the radio quite a few times. I wrote quite a few articles in the newspaper. But my first article was for the Independent 2008. Which bizarrely enough, I was paid 4 times as much as the article in the Guardian, in the Independent in 2008. I was paid 4 times as much as I was paid in 2019, 2020 for the other one. Go figure. It's like,
as a writer, I completely get that.
That's how good writing for a career is. Yeah, absolutely. It's just like,
you seem to get paid less as a writer throughout your career. It's quite astonishing.
Apart from the Wellcome Trust. The Wellcome Trust are great. Write for the Wellcome Trust. They pay really, really well. They're really fair. I've written a couple of articles for them as well.
They also have a fabulous library that I've researched in, and they're so helpful.
Yeah. Oh, they're great. And the old director of the Wellcome Trust was my internal examiner as well for my PhD. But anyway, totally another story.
So have you done any more work on Francis Bacon? I mean, are you planning on bringing out a novel or a book or anything? Or is the PhD just... No?
It's difficult because, I mean, one of the problems that I'm having now is that I have a very limited amount of time that I function for during the day. I can get 3 or 4 hours of brain work in, and then I'm done. I mean, I sleep every afternoon. I don't sleep very well at night. I'll get 3 or 4 hours in the night if I'm lucky, and an hour in the afternoon, and that's all I can sleep. I spend most of the night lying there going, I can't sleep. It's really quite irritating, but I can't do anything else either. So I have a very limited amount of energy to do stuff. When I wrote the novel, I battened the hatches down. I wrote the first draft in 19 days.
Wow.
I did nothing but write, and then I spent an awful lot of time rewriting it, obviously.
Yeah.
But I'd also been thinking about it for 3 years, and it was based on a lot of letters and a lot of real documents and things. Mm-hmm. But it's very hard work writing these things, and to do it on my own is probably beyond me now. It's writing like that. Unfortunately, it's tough. I co-wrote with Nadine an article about archival practice that's going into a book this year or next year. Not sure when that's happening. I'm writing this book with her now, and I teach at Oxford in the Centre for Continuing Education, do a course on Bacon every year, which I'm doing starting on Saturday again. So that's going to be, if I can remember who he was, that'll be rather useful. But it's very difficult to actually spend that amount of time and energy doing anything now. So it'll take an awful long time to write another novel, unfortunately.
I've just put the link to Killing Beauties, the historical novel, in the chat there, so everybody can check that out. Very quickly, I just realized we're slightly running out of time. So I'm just going to tell everyone what's coming up soon, and then we'll come back to you in just a second. So everybody, just to let you know that on PPG next, we have Rosie Stancer interviewing the war artist Arabella Dorman. That is next Tuesday, 22nd of February at, of course, 12 o'clock. And then on the 1st of March, Alistair Hicknall is going to be interviewing Baroness Tanny Gray Thompson. She needs no introduction, I'm sure. Fascinating woman. I can't wait to see that one. And then Rosie is back on the 8th of March, interviewing Ros Savage, who rode solo around the world. And as you all know, if you've been to hers before, that Rosie herself is a solo polar explorer, absolutely phenomenal. And we've got more things coming up later. And on the book club, just to let you know that what we've got coming up. So this week, you've got me 3 times this week. So I'm doing book club on Thursday and Friday to make up for when I was away and Humphrey was covering. So on Thursday, I'm interviewing Anne Seber, who is the biographer of many people, including, amongst others, her brand new biography of Ethel Rosenberg. She's also written books about the women of Paris during the Second World War, the biography of Winston Churchill's mother, Jenny Churchill, and a really fascinating biography, That Woman, about Wallis Simpson. And she's written so many books, I can't even mention them all here. And then on Friday, we've got Damien Labat, who's really great writer. He wrote a book called The Stopping Places, A Journey Through Gypsy Britain. He does various other kind of outreach projects. He's an excellent writer and speaker. So that is on Friday. And then next week, on Thursday, the 24th, Humphrey is interviewing Lena Sisko, the ex-Navy interrogator in Guantanamo Bay, who's written several books, including the recent one, You're Lying. And then on Friday, the 25th of February, we have Book of the Month. That's Humphrey again with The Hunt for Red October. And just to take you briefly into March, do come along on Thursday, the 3rd of March. This is going to be so fascinating. I'm interviewing Nicola Bowman, who is the founder of Persephone Books. If you've never heard of Persephone Books, do look them up. They are fantastic. Such an interesting venture. And she's also a writer herself. So thank you so much, Pete. We've got a couple of comments here. One that says 90 days. Brilliant. I think we said 19 days, actually.
19 days, not
19 days.
90.
Where is this person who says, who's identified, I don't know what the name of the person is, but they say, I once spent 5 months on a 10-line poem. So 5 months on a 10-line poem and 19 days on a novel. And as Pete said, he did go back to the novel. And then Jean says, inspirational. I know how difficult it is to deal with Parkinson's. So thank you so much, Pete Langman. You've been a fantastic interview, and I hope you'll come back onto the book club at one point and talk about your books, as well as being on PPG with us today. So when perhaps we'll get you and Nadine on to talk about the book that you're working on at the moment, it would be great to have a pair of authors coming on at some point. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming along. It's great to see how many more people are getting to know about PPG. And also, of course, please to tell your friends who are other Goldster members that this will, of course, be available to watch on Catch Up as well. Pete, I wish you all good luck with your album, your writing, and the house move. Because I think those all in combination sound quite terrifying. And so somebody said, would I mind mentioning the book about the traveller community? Let me just put this into the chat. It is Damien Labat, The Stopping Places, and he will be here on Friday. So if you haven't signed up for book club, please do sign up. I think most people who are here will have already been signed up to book club, but you can join the book club by registering with Goldster. And that is on Friday, the whatever Friday is, the 18th. Sorry, I'm a little bit lost on dates. I'm still slightly jet lagged. So everybody, thank you so much for coming along today. Really looking forward to seeing you on Thursday and Friday this week. You're going to be sick of me by the end of this week, but it's all right. You've got Humphrey again next week. Pete, thank you so much. Take care. It was great to see you. I'm going to turn off my video now, and there's going to be a small poll, I think, put up by Stephanie, and we'll see you all in a couple of days. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.